Hi all, John at Badass Performance. Today we're going to go over throttle control and how to master the throttle on track. Let's start with the basics. So why throttle control matters. The throttle and good throttle control is going to manage your weight transfer. So, when you get on the power, it's going to start moving the weight of the vehicle. Same thing with the brakes. And so being effective with your throttle control is really going to make sure that all the tires are in the optimal grip range when they need to be. Having good throttle control also improves your traction and stability. As we all know, if you just dump the throttle in whatever vehicle you're in, there's a chance that you're going to split up the front wheels, the rear wheels, whatever you, and it's going to lead to having some poor traction. So having good throttle control is going to make it so that you're not losing any power by spinning up those tires, and instead you're going to put all that power right into the racing surface. And then critically for lap time, it's going to affect your cornering speed and exit acceleration. So having a good management of when you're able to power out effectively is going to help you in not having to back off the throttle, losing time there. If you have one smooth input of the throttle, you're going to reduce your lap time in the exit zone. Some tips on throttle application. You want to be smooth and have some progressive inputs, right? Don't mash the pedal. Just keep, a nice transition all the way up to 100% on the throttle pedal. Alongside that, you want to avoid stabbing or having any abrupt throttle changes. You don't want to go ahead and, immediately lift straight off the pedal. Once you're in a, 100% throttle position, you don't want to lift off straight to zero. You want to be smooth and release it if you do start to spin up those tires. And you definitely don't want to stab at the throttle because that can lead to, again, spinning up those tires. And then again, you want to balance the throttle through the weight transfer. So when you are getting on the power, again, be smooth with your inputs, start to slowly shift that weight from the front in your braking zone to the rear. And you're going to retain some of that front grip. And you're also going to make sure that there's an even load on those tires, those rear tires in a rear wheel drive car, to effectively power out of the corner and not have any spinning situations. If you load them quickly, there's a high risk that you will start spinning up those tires, leading to you in an oversteer situation, or just not getting the grip that you need out of the corner, so you're going to lose lap time there. Let's briefly go over how the throttle affects car balance. So impacts on the car balance: when you are off throttle, the weight is going to shift to a neutral position or have more front grip. As you are lifting, once you lift off the throttle, the transmission is still engaged, so what's going to lead to is a slight deceleration by the rolling resistance and the engine braking, doing it automatically. So you're going to have more of a more grip on your front tires, right? And what that leads to, obviously, is less grip on the rear. So you're going to have less grip on the rear once those fronts start to load. So when you are transitioning from a full throttle position, going into a corner, going into the braking zone, and when you start braking or during your lift, there's going to be more weight on those front tires, and you're going to have less grip on those rears. So there is there's a higher risk of getting rotation because there's less grip on those rears. And then the inverse is true when you are on throttle. So you're going to have more grip on the rear and less grip on the front. Even once you're in a full throttle position, all that weight is going to be shifting towards the rear, and you're going to have less grip on those fronts. So there's an understeer risk there. So you want to make sure that you're managing your exits effectively. You're not going to have as much grip as you do in turn-in on your exit. So you want to effectively manage that so that you're not getting on the throttle too early and then compromising yourself on the exit, running out of track, having to lift, etc. And then breaking down the different phases of a corner. You can use your throttle throughout the entirety of the corner. Entry is a little bit kind of on the edge. There would be some really niche cases. I wouldn't, do that as a, beginner. But for the entry, you're typically going to be on throttle or have a slight maintenance throttle. So just kind of like a, say 10%. And the reason for that would be maybe you want to keep some of your turbo. If you're in a turbocharged car, you want to keep the turbo spooled just a little bit so that you have better power coming out of the corner. That would really be the only reason for it. Obviously, on your downshifts, you're going to be giving throttle to match your revs. But really when you're coming into the corner, the only use would really be for, a turbo. And then the same thing can apply to the mid corner. So it's really to maintain balance or keep that turbo spooling if it is a turbocharged car. The maintaining the balance is going to be trail braking, right? So you would have both your inputs in kind of like a 20, 30 maybe percent figure. So you're on the brakes and you're on the throttle, maintaining kind of a neutral position with the balance of the car, so that you have a smoother transition between braking and your exit of the corner, getting on the throttle. And then on the exit, gradually increasing the throttle, not spinning up those tires, because that means that the power is not actually making its way to the racing surface. So gradually increasing that throttle and you'll achieve correct acceleration, the maximum acceleration for your vehicle. So this is all great in theory, but how do you actually do this in practice? So let's go over a couple things. One is going to be, you want to understand what the power curve looks like for your vehicle, because that's going to help you in understanding how you can apply the throttle. So the first thing would be, when you're looking at the power curve, you want to make sure that you want to know whether there are some sudden power peaks. You would typically see that in a turbocharged application, or you would see that in maybe a high displacement V8 car, where you would have a high torque zone, maybe kind of in the mid rev range. You want to be aware of that so that you understand what your car is doing as you're applying the throttle, right? So what you can do in those cases, let's take the turbocharged car, for example. So in the high rev range, you have a large power increase. What you could do is creep your throttle position, maybe go up to, you can abruptly run up to a 50% throttle, but once you get higher than that, your boost kicks in, and then you're going to need to slowly start to go from the 50 to 100. So that information can be really helpful when you're managing your throttle, because in some cars, like a naturally aspirated vehicle, you may not have that issue. You can have a gradual increase all the way up the rev range, but if you do that with a turbocharged car, you could run into issues, or you could be leaving time on the track, right? So you want to make sure that you understand what the power curve looks like and can appropriately accommodate for that in your throttle application. I think it's also helpful to understand what the differential type is in your vehicle. So whether you have an open or limited slip differential can really change the characteristics of how your power makes it to the ground. So in an open differential car, you're going to have less reliability, or less predictability, I should say, in how the power is actually transmitted to the ground. What it can lead to is less grip for your inside tire. Your inside tire is going to have less of a load on it, and so that's going to start to spin that tire up earlier. So that can be really helpful in understanding what you need to do with the balance of the car. Maybe you need to have less of an angle, a slip angle, less lateral rotation on the vehicle, less loading on the outside, in order to properly apply the throttle. In a limited slip differential, obviously depending on, what type it is and things like that, you run into that issue less. It's kind of already not optimized, but pretty well optimized for the grip that you need in the corner. And so if you have a limited slip car, maybe you can be more aggressive with getting on your throttle while you're actually turning, as opposed to really in a straight line. So understanding your differential type can be really helpful in understanding how you can manage your throttle, what you can do and what you can't do, what you can kind of get away with and what you can't. So definitely look into that. And then knowing the gear ratio can also be really important in understanding what your car can do and what it can't do. So for example, if you have a shorter ratio, maybe you have a 5-to-1 ratio or something like that, your gears are going to be really short. So for example, first may go up to 20, then second to 40, third to 60, for example, in a really short ratio. What that can mean is you're going to be going through the power curve a lot faster than you would be if you had a longer gear ratio. So what that's going to do for you in your car is it's going to mean you're going to have to be less aggressive when you're actually getting on the power, because you're going to be ripping through your engine speed a lot faster than if you had a short ratio. And this is kind of the minutia, right? It's kind of in the details, but this can be really helpful in understanding what you can do and what you can't do. If you have a nice long ratio, you could basically mash that throttle, for coming out of the corner, because you have all that time to manage getting all the way up to peak power. Whereas with a short ratio, you're going to have to be pretty dialed in on, how you're applying your power, because you're going to start ripping through those, your engine speed really fast. So keep that in mind as well. All right, let's go over some common mistakes. First one let's cover is too much throttle too early. So you're getting on the throttle maybe even before the apex of the corner. What that's going to lead to is, again, right, your grip is going to head towards the rear of the vehicle. So you're going to have less front grip. And what that could lead to is two outcomes. One would be you're going to understeer. So you're getting on the power, and then you're going to run out of track on the exit of the corner, right? So in that case, you want to manage your throttle so you're not limiting yourself, running out of track on the exit of the corner. The other outcome would be if you're getting on the power too aggressively, maybe you're, again, in the mid corner, something like that, you start getting on the power really aggressively, the tires could overload and lead to an oversteer situation and have you spin, right? So getting on the throttle too early can cause you some issues. So you want to, again, just manage that, have nice smooth inputs, and you're going to be much better set up for success. The next would be your throttle inputs. So again, be nice and smooth. You don't want to jab at the throttle, because what it's going to do is your tires are going from kind of a low effort position, bringing the power to the actual ground, to now you're telling it to apply, a large amount of power to the racing surface. And that can lead to having less lateral grip, so your tires start to walk, again, rotate the car unevenly. And you can run into some pretty nasty situations there. So be nice and progressive when you're applying the throttle. And then the other thing is lifting in the mid corner. That can definitely cause issues, because your mid corner is going to be when you're at your highest steering angle, you're at your highest, G load on those tires. So if you lift in the mid corner, what's going to happen is you're going to move all that weight back to the front tires, and then you're not going to have any grip on those rears, and they're just going to start to walk, and that's going to be your lift-off oversteer, right? So definitely try to avoid those things. The best advice that I can give is just be smooth with your inputs, right? Just take a nice progressive inputs, both in your braking, but for this, your throttle, be nice and progressive, and you'll have a lot better results on track. Let's go over some drills really quick that you can use when you're on track. First one is going to be basically what the point of this video is, what we've been preaching, is slowly rolling onto the throttle in the corners. So, if you are going from a position where you're only getting on the power on exit, when you're in more of a straight line position, start to back your throttle position up a little bit, closer to the apex of the corner. See how it feels, see what you can get away with, and what starts to kind of make your car feel uneasy, less stability. And just start to, corner, use one corner, for example, start to get a little earlier, see where your tires start to kind of fall off. And then you can play around with another corner and keep continuing that through the lap. And your times will thank you. With that, you can also practice throttle modulation through different turns, right? So, trying to get on the power more aggressively in one turn, or, changing your habits in certain corners. The idea is you want to get on the power as soon as you can without having another related side effect, right? Running out of track, having understeer, or rotating the car. So play around with what you can get away with. Obviously, you want to start doing this with a consistent lap time, a consistent lap. So then you can actually evaluate how your car is actually being impacted by these changes. And then you also want to use data or video to review how your car is reacting to the changes that you're making. So don't just go out and say, well, that felt pretty good, so I'm going to do that from now on. Just because it feels good is not the end-all be-all indicator, right? The end-all be-all indicator is going to be the stopwatch. So make sure you're looking at your data, seeing how your lap time did, how you did versus another session where you weren't doing that to see if that actually was what benefited to, potentially having a better lap time or not. And then take all the different corners that you've played around with, what you did for those corners, put them all together, and then you got your PR, you got your fastest lap. So that would be a good way to go about it. Your video can also be helpful. Make sure you're watching your videos. Get a cheap GoPro. You can get a used one for pretty cheap. Throw it on your car, and that'll let you actually review, even if you don't have data. You can listen to the engine speed and try to make changes that way. You should still be timing your lap. There are tons of free pieces of software on your phone that you can use to actually time your laps. You don't have to get a aim or something like that. You can just use your phone and then try to match those two pieces of data together, and you have a pretty good indicator of how your changes are affecting your lap time. All right, I hope this video was helpful. If you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comments. We'd love to hear from you. If you did find the video helpful, please do like and subscribe. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out. There's our contact information below. You can add us on Instagram, or you can shoot us an email at the email address below. Feel free to reach out, and we're happy to help you out if you have any questions or anything like that. And with that, we'll see you in the next one. All right, thanks, y'all.